kind of in line with this series on marriage where we're talking, the title of it is For Better or Worse. We're talking about marriage because times are good in marriage and times aren't so good at times in our marriages. And so my encouragement last week, if you missed the opener, you can go back and get a kind of refresher or get caught up on the foundation that we laid. But I do believe this series is for everybody, whether you're unmarried and maybe potentially will be at one point. Maybe you have friends that you have that are married and you have conversations with them and maybe some things that you can share with them. Perhaps you have a really good marriage, some things that may just enhance that, maybe some tensions that you need to manage, maybe some things that can help you hit the reset button. What this is not is a 5-week counseling session. And I say that with all sincerity because if there are some deeper, more serious issues that are going on in your relationship, then come talk to us and we can get you connected with some people who can really help you walk through some of those things. But hopefully these are just some truths and some things that you hear over the course of this series that can help you just be better equipped in your marriages, which is what I hope the whole purpose of it is. And so last week as we started off, just to get some of you guys caught up on last week and where we are today quickly, because we did talk about some of the expectations and the things that we bring into our marriages and how so often we bring our singleness into marriage and some of those mindsets and thought processes that we have about life and just the different aspects of our life that though it may not affect us in any other way outside of ourselves personally, when we come into marriage, there's another person that it affects. And so I formulated a gospel of marriage, and I want to remind you of that, of what that looks like. And this is not in your Bible. Again, this is according to me. Here it is. Now, put to death the deeds of singleness, selfishness, unaccountability, having authority over your own body, spending money on your own desires, living with no regard to anyone else. Such were some of you, but you have been married, you have become one with another, you have said, I do. So now put on the new married self as one who has been united with another, having crucified singleness with his passions and desires. And again, this is the gospel according to me. Now, all that pertains to every area that we're going to be talking about moving forward. And the 4 weeks from this point on, today we're going to be talking about money. Next week, we're going to be talking about sex. The next week, we're going to be talking about kids. And then the last week, we're going to finish up with forgiveness. And so that's kind of what this series is going to look like. And so what we did is we launched last week this challenge called the SOS Challenge. Now, if you were here, you know that that's based off of the Song of Solomon. And my encouragement was for you to shift your focus on the things that irritate you about your spouse. Specifically, I challenged the guys last week to shift your focus onto the things that you love about your spouse and connect it to things that you love personally. And some of you guys got on board with it. I want to share some of these with you. All right, this is Bob and his wonderful wife, Debbie. He said, tried to think of an SOS challenge all week that wouldn't get me in hot water. I think this is safe, but it should have been plural, my ARs. Here's what he said. I love you more than I love my ARs. And that's saying something, right? So he connected his to his love for his ARs. All right, and I think he said he has like 15 something of them, so don't try to break in Bob's house. All right, next one. This was Matt Eads. He said to Corey Eads, you move with the grace of a falling dandelion in a light breeze. Every turn is spontaneous and naturally beautiful. Now some of you guys are like, this guy here. Yeah. All right, let's keep going. Robert, he said, Elizabeth, your smile is like the pure white snow back home, providing joy when I know it is just for me, comforting as it provides a beautiful and memorable backdrop to my life and offering security and reassurance along our path. Some of you guys are really getting irritated. All right, we're keep going. Listen, this is to encourage you. All right, maybe some of these next ones will encourage you. Jordan said, "Your drive and work ethic compares to that of Wonder Woman, and I'm always in awe. I have my own superhero wife." Y'all are supposed to go, "Ah." Okay, all right. Here we go. Jason told Rebecca, "Your hips are like the steering wheel of an AMG S650. Handle all the curves and can't wait to drive." See, guys? See? Guys, you don't have to be real poetic. You can just be practical. All right? Jason had another one. This one was one of my favorite ones. He said, "Your lips are like a 24-year-old single batch barrel-proof bourbon. Hot and sweet with caramel spicy goodness." Huh? See, guys, it's not that hard. Yeah? Matt and Robert made it harder than it has to be. I appreciate their effort. Last one here. James says, "Your eyes are like the finest wine. They make me do dumb stuff." That's fair enough. Yeah, that's fair enough. All right, so guys, let's keep it going. Hashtag it so we can go back and we can get them caught up this week, and whatever it is that relates to your situation and the things that you love and enjoy, connect it to your wife and focus on the things that you love. And we're going to be doing this all throughout the course of the series. So these guys kind of took the first step. Now you guys continue on in that. And so we are today going to be talking about money. So often we don't like to talk about it, right? I mean, we talk, all right, here we go. This preacher's talking about money again. I promise you this, I'm not going to ask you to give any more money than what you've already given today in the offering, okay? I'm not after your money. I don't think God's after your money. I think God's after your heart. And this is what we're going to talk about today. But so often we don't like talking about money. And we're not going to talk, I'll give you a couple of practical tips, okay, in money management and those type things. But really today is something bigger than just about do this and don't do this and you'll be better off financially, okay? But there are some things, some mentalities and some ideas that we have about money, and you'll recognize this one, right? Money can't buy you love. Right? I mean, I would agree with that. Anybody else agree with that? Yeah, I do too. I mean, Ariana Grande said that the heart wants what it wants. So you can't buy love. You can't buy what it wants. So I agree with this. Here's another one. Money can't make you happy. Anybody else agree with that? Yeah, no, I disagree with that. Okay? Just so y'all know. Perhaps you've heard pastors say, and trying to make you feel guilty about, having money, they'll say money can't make you happy. And probably in your mind, you may have thought, well, you seem kind of miserable most of the time. Maybe it's because you're depositing that check we give you, so why don't you do it for free and see how happy you are? Anybody else thought that? No, well, maybe not. But I believe that money can make you happy if we have the right attitude about it. That money can't buy you love and money can't buy you happiness, but I believe there are things that money allows, and the right attitude and frame of mind about money can make us happy. And we're going to talk about some of that, but so often we don't want to talk about money. And that's the problem. That's the problem, because Dave Ramsey, if you know who Dave Ramsey is, he has an organization where they help people get out of debt and stay out of debt, and they have a lot of really good principles and practical steps to getting to that point of getting out of debt and staying out of debt. But last year, the study they just did at the end of last year, they found out that conflict around money was the number 2 cause for divorce behind infidelity. And the 2 factors about money that lead to the conflict, number 1, is a high amount of debt and a lack of communication. High amount of debt and lack of communication. So if you have a whole lot of debt, then it's going to create problems in your marriage. And if you don't talk about it, and I'm not talking about opening your mouth and speaking about it, because statistics also show that if you argue about money once a week, you are 30 times more likely to get a divorce. So talking about it doesn't mean arguing about it, but today we are going to talk about it. So here's a couple of practical pieces of advice for you. Get out of debt and stay out of debt and talk about it. Let's pray and go home, right? That's it. That's what you came for, right? But we're going beyond that. We're going beyond just some practical applications of what to do with our money. We're going to be looking at two areas today. We're going to be looking at our attitude about money and the parallel that it has in our marriages, in our attitude in our marriages. And we're going to be looking at a principle of money and the parallel that it has in our marriages and in our lives. Because when you look at it and you talk about the attitude that we have about money, I believe that so often it's what we talked about last week in our expectations about marriage. And when we come into marriage with these misguided expectations and these unrealistic expectations we have for our spouse, sometimes they're expectations that they could never hold up to, never live up to. We hold them to expectations that are unrealistic. We hold them to expectations that we wouldn't want put on us so often. And I think we have the same attitude and the same unrealistic expectation about money because for us, culturally, what we've been told about money is what will make you happy is if you have what? More. I'll be happy. Money will make me happy if I have more money, right? Well, let me ask you this. If more money is going to make you happy, if you get more money, you know how much money is going to make you happy at that point? More. That's right. You guys know people that have more money than you that are happier than you. But you also know people who have more money than you that are unhappier than you. Is that right? More unhappier. Let's do the double superlative. That are more unhappier than you are. But you also know people who have less money than you that are happier than you. And you know people who have less money than you that are less happier than you, whatever that looks like. So it can't be the amount of money that makes you happy. It's your attitude about money and about even beyond money. And again, we're going to tie this in on the back end to our marriages, but our attitude about money and what that is and what that looks like. And culturally, we have been taught and we have been convinced of this concept and this idea that Andy Stanley calls this, the consumption assumption. Sounds like an after-school special, doesn't it? Consumption assumption. What's your... Yeah, it's not even real, but y'all know where I was going with that. Yeah. The consumption assumption, it's this idea that we assume that everything is for us to consume. Right? And so what this idea, this assumption, consumption does, and what this idea drives in us is this disease of awareness. We get this. And here's what I mean. Any of you ever been walking through a store and just going about your merry way, not even thinking about buying anything? You're just kind of walking around looking, window shopping, and then you see something that you didn't even know existed. And then all of a sudden, you got to have it, right? 30 seconds ago, you didn't know it existed. Now you can't live without it. And then you go online and you start Googling and you start searching it, start finding out more about it. You think, nah, I'm going to hold off on it, right? A couple hours later, you get back on your phone and you get on Facebook and then an ad pops up for what? The very same thing that you were looking at that just 2 hours ago you didn't even know existed, and now it's all over. It must be a sign from God. I'm supposed to have this. God knows I need this. His grace has been sufficient up to this point to sustain me without it, but now He's making it obvious that I got to have this. Right? That's not God, that's Google. But we all get into that, right? I mean, there are always those things. And my dad is this way, and we're all this way, all right? But this is payback for my dad for all those years. He was a preacher, so all those years he brought me into his sermon illustrations. My dad's this way. Because if there is an electronic, toy, or device, or gadget that is released, he's got to have it. I mean, he's got all the Alexas, all the watches, all the pads and tablets, all the everythings. I mean, if it's a charger or a case, my mom says it's like Christmas at the house every day, like Amazon. I mean, the mail carrier probably turns towards their house on the way home by just out of habit because he or she's so used to going there, right? But that's what we get into, is this disease of awareness where before we didn't know it existed, and now all of a sudden we got to have it. And we consume, and we take in, and we take, and we take, and we take, and it's all for us, and we have this attitude that ultimately leads us into this spirit of discontent. Because we focus on what we don't have, and all of a sudden we think we've got to have it. And so what do? We work towards consuming it more and more and more. And now Solomon says this, that there's a way that seems right to a man, but ultimately it leads to death. Now, Solomon wrote a couple of the books of the Old Testament, and many people believe, next to Jesus, he was the wisest man to walk this earth. And it shouldn't surprise us that he said that, because he said these words in Proverbs 11, that there is one who scatters and yet increases all the more. And there is one who withholds what is justly due, and yet it results only in want. Now, this is completely 180 degrees out from what the world tells us. That the one who scatters increases more, and the one who has and withholds, it only leads to want. Now, how does that make any sense? Well, there's a principle that this leads to that you all are very well aware of, right? It's this principle right here. Sowing and reaping. Sowing and reaping. Sowing and reaping. And there's a chapter here in 2 Corinthians where Paul is talking specifically about money. And he brings this principle into the picture. Look at what he says, 2 Corinthians 9, starting in verse 6. He says, "Now this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Yet each one must do as he has purposed in his heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that always having all sufficiency in everything, you may have an abundance for every good deed. As it is written, he who scattered abroad, he gave to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in everything for all liberality, which through us is producing thanksgiving to God." Now, this principle, as we understand in our lives, and you look at your own financial situation, you think about where you are today. If you're in a really good place today financially, you can look back 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, where all along the way you sowed seeds that led you to where you are today to be in a good place. If you're in a bad place today, you can look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, and you can see where you made decisions. Maybe you didn't sow, or maybe you sowed in the wrong areas or in the wrong things, and you look up today and where you are. So as a couple, so often you don't talk about where you want to go and where you want to be. And so you're just flying by the seat of your pants, thinking, oh, we've got time. And you look up, and you're 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and you think, I'm running out of time. And my encouragement to you is have this conversation. Where do you want to be 10, 15, 20, some of you younger couples, 40 years down the road? Begin planting seeds now, because there is a law that is a principle that holds true, and it has stood the test of time. It is the law of harvest. And this law of harvest takes time to produce the fruit. Whatever it is you're sowing, whatever it is you sow, you're going to reap that. The harvest is going to come from what you sow, but it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. You sow into it, and then over time, it grows, and you reap the harvest. Now, this isn't just about money. Those are truths and principles and practical truths about money in your life. But it goes beyond money, that principle of sowing and reaping. Galatians 6, look at what Paul says. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. The one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption, but the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. Whatever you sow, you will reap. That includes in your marriage, in your relationship with your spouse. What are you sowing? And I believe what we sow stems from our attitudes and our focus. Just like money, where we can get distracted by what we don't have, and we can have the spirit of discontent in our lives, the same can be true in our marriages. Where if we're focusing on the things that we don't really like about our spouse, the things that irritate us about our spouse, then we can allow our eyes to begin to wander in discontent. That was the whole point of the SOS challenge, is to shift our focus from the things that we don't like, the things that irritate us about our spouse, to consciously think about the things that we love about our spouse. That is what is on the forefront of our mind, so that we don't have this spirit of discontent growing inside of us. Because when our eyes begin to wander, we begin to consider what it might look like if we were with someone else, because our spouse irritates us, or our spouse gets on our nerves, or our spouse frustrates us about this thing, or we argue and we complain about this stuff. And so we focus on that. And so we begin to look around as if to think there's somebody else out there that's not a little bit crazy. It's just a different crazy, because we're all crazy. Some of y'all don't hear that. You're just going to be dealing with a different crazy. But we begin to look out, and we begin to look away from our spouse, and we begin to consider what it might look like somewhere else, because we're discontent, because our attitude about our spouse has changed. Here's my takeaway for you. Here's your homework. Like, anytime I'm up here, somebody's communicating, you're listening to somebody, like, my hope is that you do something with it. Sometimes it's to own a truth more deeply and for yourself. Sometimes it's like actually doing something. Here's what I want you to do this week. For those of you who are married, all right, and for those of you who aren't, let this be a jumping off point for you when you enter into a marriage relationship. Here's my challenge. Every day, I want this to be your prayer. Lord, I pray the eyes of my heart would be fixed on fill in the blank with your spouse. I pray the eyes of my heart would be fixed on your spouse. Every day. Every day. Pray that your eyes don't begin to wander out of being discontent about something that irritated you about your spouse. Now, here's what's going to happen. The devil's not going to like that prayer. So you're going to wake up and your spouse one morning is going to irritate the mess out of you. And you're not going to really feel like praying this prayer. Pray it anyway. Because we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week as we talk about sex and intimacy. But so often in times of discontent and frustration and irritation, the enemy brings that somebody in, and there's just a little bit of a glance and a little bit of a passing touch and a little bit of a look, and it begins. So my encouragement is that every day this week, this be your prayer. Lord, I pray. I don't care if you've been married for 40 years, you think you got the best marriage. Let me tell you what, the enemy is patient and long-suffering. And he will be patient your entire life to ruin your reputation, to ruin your marriage that you've built that's been so good for so long. Whether it's 10 years in, 20 years in, 30 years in, 40 years in, he wants nothing more but to destroy you in your marriage. I pray the eyes of my heart would be fixed on fill in the blank. Our attitude drives what we're sowing. Because if our attitude is that I'm going to focus on the things that I love about my spouse, then I'm going to sow into that. That's what I'm going to sow into. I'm not going to allow the things that irritate me and frustrate me about my spouse to sow seeds of discontent and discord and strife and anger and irritation. And listen, guys, the law of harvest, it pertains to your marriages. Some of y'all may have gone back last week and you said something, really not. You maybe brought your wife a gift, sent her flowers, and maybe you did the SOS challenge. And you say, well, Matt, I sent her flowers and I did that goofy SOS challenge. She still went to bed early, acted irritated at me. Have you been a jerk for the last 10 years? And you think one order of flowers or one SOS challenge statement is going to all of a sudden, you're going to sow one word of love and encouragement on a ground that is hardened and uncultivated, and then all of a sudden it's going to sprout up out of that? That's not how the law of harvest works, guys. And as we're talking about money, the same applies in a bank account. You can only withdraw money out of a bank account for so long until you go broke and there's nothing left to withdraw and the account is empty. And if you've been making withdrawals over the years without making deposits, your relationship may be broken. Time after time after time, you've consumed. You've thought it was all for you. You've consumed. You haven't made any deposits. And you look up and you think, well, I don't understand what the problem is. You guys heard the sayings about money, right? A penny saved is a penny. That applies in your marriage, right? You can't. Have you ever told your kids this? That money doesn't grow on trees. Yeah, the same applies in your marriage. You ever told somebody that's asking you for money and they keep asking you for money and they keep asking you for money, and eventually you say, you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip? The same applies to your marriage. If there's nothing there to give anymore, there's no harvest to reap. Here's my encouragement to you guys. I believe, and I'm talking to the guys. Here's why I spend so much time focusing on guys. I've yet to sit down with a couple that have come in that are having trouble in their marriages, that want to work through some stuff. I have yet to sit down, and I have yet to talk to another pastor that has this experience where they say, Matt, the wife says, Matt, you know what? I mean, he's meeting my needs. He's providing for me. We don't have a lot of debt. He says nice things to me. He cares about me. He loves me in the way that I feel loved by meeting my love language. I'm just not very happy. I've never heard that before. Never. Guys, so much of the responsibility lies on you as the spiritual head of your house. And I believe your wife's heart is like a fertile ground. That if you continue to take or you continue to withhold and you do not sow and you do not cultivate and you do not take care of and you do not tend to, then it's going to be hardened. But maybe you're at that spot right now. Maybe your wife's heart is hardened because of years of not sowing, of years of not making deposits. I just believe, maybe I'm naive, but I believe that God's a God of restoration and He can change your wife's heart. And that starting today, you plant a seed. And then tomorrow, you plant a seed. And day after day, you plant seeds. And then you cultivate it. You cultivate her heart day after day. You tend to her heart. You care for her heart. You give attention to her heart. Then eventually, there will be a harvest. Guys, keep sowing. Keep sowing. Let me pray. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for your promises. Thank you for your truths that, God, they transcend space and time and all issues and elements in our lives. God, I thank you for the promise of the truth that he who scatters much more will be brought back. God, he who withholds, there will still be want. And God, I pray for us, the men here in this room. God, I pray that we'll be sowers. God, that we will sow into the lives and into the hearts of our wives. And God, that regardless of the situation, perhaps there are those who have been. Father, I pray that it continues to be the case, and that our prayer would be that the eyes of our hearts stay fixed on our spouses. But God, for those who are here today who maybe their wives, their hearts have been hardened for years of neglect that hadn't been tended for, hadn't been cared for, God, I pray that as the husbands begin to sow, Father, that the heart begins to soften and that their hearts are watered. And God, you have promised to cause the growth. God, we stand on that and we thank you for that. And we celebrate what you're going to do in the lives of so many. It's in your name we pray. Amen.